I would like to start off just by saying thank you to Hamish and the rest of the Mechanical Rock and Latency team for letting me be here today to talk to you. I don't get around to conferences very much, which is why people kind of don't know that there is a co-founder here. So we'll start off today. I'll give you a little bit of background about me, kind of who I am, a little bit of background about Grafana, but it seems like most of you probably know a fair amount. And then we'll kind of dive in. So I want to talk a little bit around observability today. So obviously that's kind of our core focus area. We've been working in this for the last 10 years and have had a lot of experience talking to our community and our customers. So I want to talk about like what it is, kind of why it's important to us and what some of the things we need to do to kind of be successful as we kind of look at observability strategies, as well as a little kind of peek into kind of where we kind of think the future is going. So starting off with me, as Hamish said, I'm a local Perth boy. Grew up in Sorrento. Actually my first job, here was at IronNet, right? It was a great place. I started off, as a systems and network admin, moved into the engineering group, and I was really fortunate, back then when I started at IronNet because, I just had the freedom to get involved in whatever I could. I could go and work in networks, I could work in storage, I could work in infrastructure, I could work in virtualization, and that really kind of inspired just a keen interest in me in kind of bridging the gap between all of these kind of IT functions, and a lot of that is through tooling and automation. So that's kind of where I started my career. And then I went and moved to Singapore. That's where I met Raj Dutt, fellow co-founder and now CEO at Grafana Labs. So Raj had a managed hosting company he'd started in his dorm room in New York and was looking to expand into Singapore, and I was the first employee there. And so, building out the engineering group, working with our customers, a very diverse range of customer needs. I also spent a lot of time, working on our products for, on-demand virtualization and on-demand physical service. So again, a lot of kind of tooling, a lot of automation to kind of glue everything together. I then went and did a little bit of stint at Visa, the credit card company. And I just remember, just before I joined, how excited I was to go and work in big enterprise and work with enterprise software. And be like, oh, this is going to be so great. My life's going to be so much easier with this great enterprise software. It's going to be far superior to these hacks that I can put together. And I was just enlightened with how horrible it all was. And so I was really lucky. I mean, it wasn't in my job description, but after building a quick kind of proof of concept over a weekend that I showed to my manager, he gave me the freedom to start replacing some of these very expensive tools with things that I could just build myself, often kind of cobbling together a lot of open source technology along the way. And that was really successful, right? And it really was kind of the pivotal moment in my career where I realized I wanted to go and do a startup, right? Not only did I now have, a better appreciation for, my own skills and what I was capable of doing, but I also had a much better appreciation for how, terrible the state of tooling was and the lack of, really good solutions that existed in the market. So I went back, worked with Raj again for a little bit. After that, he'd sold his company to a big company, a big public company, and we worked together mostly around kind of OpenStack before we finally kind of pulled the trigger and said let's go and do something. Right? And that's when we started Grafana. And so shortly after starting, I moved back to Perth. And so even though I've been here since 2000, almost 9 years now, beginning of 2015. I have a pretty low profile, and I attribute most of that to the fact that as we built the company, mostly in Europe and US, I just worked at night, right? So I'd start my work at around 7 p.m. at night and work through until 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. A lot of late nights. I don't recommend it. It's not a healthy life choice, but it was a lot of fun. And so then last year, just as the company has scaled, I've been able to kind of shift into a role where I can really focus on helping our APAC area and kind of getting more involved in our community, and also work a kind of a regular healthy schedule, which is kind of why I'm here today. So that's kind of about me, and a little bit about kind of Grafana Labs. You'll kind of know Grafana, which is great to see, but those that don't, Grafana is kind of the world's kind of most popular, operational dashboard technology, right? We really focus on, building great visualizations and leveraging the data that people have, and focus really on what we like to kind of call like our big tent philosophy, right? Which is really focusing on interoperability and integration and bringing your data together, no matter where it lives, and not having to go and replace things. And so we've had a lot of success with that, and as we've grown, we've extended beyond, just core Grafana itself. And so open source, Grafana is core to what we do. It's really important to us. Sorry about that. But we've branched out, and so we learn along the way. As we worked with our community, as we worked with our customers, where there were challenges and where there were things that they were running into problems with, and part of that was just on storing their telemetry data, right? So we built better databases. So we built Loki, right, for our log aggregation, right? We built Tempo for distributed tracing, Mimir for our highly scalable distributed backend for storing metrics. All of these we focused really on scale and cost efficiency, right? Like how do we do things much cheaper than what is being done in the market today? And then we also expanded out, right? We have Pyroscope for continuous profiling, Grafana On-Call for kind of incident response, Faro for front-end observability, Baylor for auto instrumentation using eBPF, K6 for our load testing, and then also we have a lot of our engineers that are working in the broader ecosystem in like the Prometheus and open telemetry space. And we see a lot of value in open source. For us, we think that's kind of the where innovation is happening in the world is in open source, and we want to be part of that. But it's also interesting. We see many people see the value of open source and they want to have the success, but they don't have the technical competence to be able to go and do it. And so we also have our Grafana Cloud platform, where it's really that kind of turnkey solution out of the box that builds on top of open source, but just does things for them. But I'm not here for a sales pitch, so let's move on. I wanted to start off with kind of the basics around what is observability. And so observability is really, it's not a new term, right? It's existed for a long time, but it's kind of new to software development. And it's really the practice of kind of understanding how complex systems work by looking at the data that they output. We talk about, observations are kind of approximations of the truth, right? We're not going to know exactly what's happening, but the more data we have, the closer to the truth we're going to be able to get as to what is actually going on. And so, that's really important. We want to have data coming out of our system so we can know, our software, once we deploy it, it is kind of a black box. We don't know what's going on. And so observability is our practice of being able to kind of, peer behind that curtain and have a look to see, what are our users doing? How is our system working? Is it doing what we expect? But then as we move on, and we think about why, why do we need observability? And the simple answer there is it's really around software, right? So whether you know it, whether you like it or not, right? Software is taking over the world. Every successful company out there today, in some way, is a software company, right? Our software is what helps us compete in the market. It helps us differentiate ourselves. It helps us kind of engage with our customers. And so, in order to be successful in today's market, you have to have software. And that means you need software engineers. And software engineers, they're difficult to hire, right? To find good ones. You put a lot of effort in to retain them. So you want to make sure that you're making them as efficient as possible when it comes to their work they're doing, right? And we've seen a shift over the last few years about how we go and do that, right? We've seen the shift of changing the way that we build software, the way that we ship software, right? To help our engineers be more efficient. We want to kind of break down a lot of the synchronization kind of communication challenges that they have across teams and be able to kind of shift to a model where we have smaller teams working on smaller problem sets that they can work independently and go and deliver success. And so this has been really successful. This kind of shift to shifting from big monoliths, shifting to client server, shifting to microservices has all had a really big impact on helping our engineers deliver value to our customers faster. And that's really what we want to optimize for. But that comes at a cost. And that cost is complexity, right? So as we take our big monoliths and we break them up into smaller components, we're also making them a lot more complex to understand, right? We might have an individual team who's got really good understanding of how their component works, but suddenly now it becomes very difficult for any one person to understand how the whole system fits together, right? How does everything work really well? And so because of this complexity, this is really why we're seeing this growing trend in observability. But one of the interesting things about the complexity that we're seeing here is the complexity kind of already existed to begin with, but now it's a lot more obvious, right? We're kind of wearing the complexity on our sleeves through microservices, right? It's very clear, it's very obvious that there are these individual components that are all working together, in tandem to try and deliver, the end result for our users. And so even though we do have more complexity now, it's more obvious that there is complexity, and so we know we need to go and try and tame that. And so that's really is kind of the crux of why observability is such an important thing when we're building software. And just to give you an example, this is a great little kind of diagram that people used to complain about all the time. So this was the original architecture for Cortex, which is now our Mimir, scalable, distributed, metrics backend, right? And all it does is store metrics and allow you to query them. But it has a very complicated architecture diagram, and people used to complain about this. We did a lot of work. The complexity still exists, but we have models now where you could go and deploy it as a single binary. Everything just runs together in one process, or you can break it up and have a separate write path and a read path, etc. But the complexity is there, right? When we run this at scale, whether we're running it ourselves or our users or customers are running it at scale, this is certainly the model that we recommend, right? So that you have, a microservices architecture, you can independently scale, components based on, the resources and what they actually need to get done. And so this is just a good example, and I just love this because, so many people complain about this diagram. But I think it's true and it's honest. All right, and so this really is the crux, right? So we want our observability, to help us kind of tame the complexity that we've now got inside of our applications. But what value? What do we get out of our observability? And so there's quite a few kind of key benefits, right? So one is improved reliability, and that's really, really important. We want to make sure that our software is working. When we deploy things, we want to make sure that we can, maintain that uptime, that, whatever it is that's important for our business, whatever that kind of KPI needs to be. We have more transparency. We know what's happening inside of our application, hopefully, right? And we can see exactly, what our users are trying to do, what is our application trying to do. It helps us inform decisions, right? We want to be data-driven, right? We want to make decisions, based on data that we have rather than hunches. And so having, good observability data, helps drive that decision-making process. Helps with prioritization, right? If we've got good observability, we know where we want to go and prioritize, which component is going to give us our, efforts are going to get us our biggest bang for our buck when it comes to investments that we're making. Accountability. I love having, dashboards for teams where you can show, their reliability, right? And just be able to have that accountability that everybody can see, how things are going, right? And you don't mean to be perfect, right? We just want to focus on, if you're aware of the problem, then it's something that you can go and address. And obviously, we really want to get to that phase where we have, fewer surprises. But the reality is incidents are always going to happen, right? We really can't avoid them. The cost of improving reliability, every 9 that you add to your reliability metric is a 10x investment in cost. So we know that it's something that we just have to accept. Incidents are going to happen, but we want to make sure that we're aware of them as quickly as possible, right? We want to hopefully be aware of them before our customers notice, right? So we can get in and fix things, make sure that our systems, maintain, the perception of working really well, and that's really important. And we really want to kind of be in a place where, we're not living in a constant kind of reactive state. I've been there myself, where getting paged every day, things are constantly breaking, and it's exhausting, right? We want to get to a phase where we feel confident in the system that we have. We understand that things are working. And then the big part of observability is really about kind of empowering teams, right? Giving them the tools they need to be successful. We want, observability is not all just about the tools, right? It really is, kind of the practices and the kind of the engineering culture that we want to build. And we want to make sure, that people have that passion for wanting to understand, and then make sure they have the tools to help deliver on that. And then as we mature, our observability practice, we get to what we like to say true observability, right? In the end state, because we know that there's always going to be incidents, we always know that something's going to go wrong eventually. We want to make sure, when we have observability, that we have the ability to answer new questions, right? So really, observability, as opposed to monitoring. Monitoring is great for tracking the known unknowns, and observability, we really want to focus on those unknown unknowns, right? Like I didn't even know that it was something I needed to worry about, and so we've got this ability to ask these new questions, understand our application without having to go and push new code. And this is really important. It helps kind of, obviously accelerate, the work that our teams can do to go and, resolve issues and keep our applications running. And so how do we do observability, right? What is it that we actually need to make this possible, right? And so we obviously have, what we call the 3 pillars of observability. And so this is our metrics, our logs, and our traces. And so these all have, their own place, right? They're specific kind of ways of approaching the problem, and give us good visibility and visibility to different aspects of our systems. And so we always get the question, from our users is, do you need to have all 3? Can you just use one? And so, yes, but no. So, what we see, with these tools, they have different trade-offs, certainly around kind of cost and performance. So if you want to do all on metrics, it's going to give you some visibility, but, in order to kind of capture, the amount of data that you need to really understand, you're going to have a huge number of dimensions, and it's going to just increase the kind of cardinality of your metrics, and your costs are going to go up. Likewise with logs, right? You can dump everything into logs, but then it's going to be very expensive to be parsing all those logs just to generate insights around trends and what's happening across your applications over time. Likewise with traces, right? A huge amount of data, it's really valuable, but it comes with a lot of cost. So for us, actually, I'll just skip ahead. So for us, it really comes down to, cost. You can do this, with one tool, but the value that you get out of it doesn't grow at the same rate as the size of your infrastructure and your applications. So you have a linear growth of your kind of applications and your growth of your revenue, but you have this kind of exponential growth, for your observability bill, right? And that's a bit of a problem for a lot of people. All right, I'll jump back to kind of talking about our metrics. So, at Grafana Labs, we Raj, our CEO, he's a big pilot fan. He loves to fly planes, and so we like to use this kind of analogy as we talk about what metrics are. So for us, we really kind of think of metrics as that high-level overview, right? It's like the cockpit, it's like all those gauges and signals you're getting where you can just hop in, have a look, have a good understanding of what's going on at a glance, but you don't have a lot of detail. It's just yes, things are looking like they're going well. There's no major issues, or maybe there are, and it's pretty obvious you can see them, but you won't know exactly why. You'll just know that there is some issues. So this is really good for kind of showing trends, showing understanding of what's happening. We then have our logs, which are our event stream, right? So things that are actually happening inside of our applications. These just get emitted every time something happens, and they contain a lot of detail, right? They're really useful for understanding, what happened, what an application did, but it's something we would typically look at, after the fact. We kind of think of this as like the black box in your airplane. It's got a huge amount of data, but it's going to take you some time to kind of sift through that data and look for, exactly what it is that you're looking for, that kind of root cause of a problem. And then we have traces, which are really around kind of bringing, giving you insights into how all of the different pieces work together. So they give you a lot of kind of context around how different components interact with other components, what that full kind of request lifecycle looked like. You might have, dozens or, even more microservices that a single request is bouncing through, and traces really give you that visibility into how that request kind of passed through the different components, before the response, came back. So, we have these three different tools, and just on the topic of tools, we actually have just done another observability survey. This one's from last year, and I think the 2024 one, I think, data has just come out just earlier this week, but it pretty much says the same thing, right? So we know that we have separate tools, we've got challenges, and that's normal to have, right? We're not going to try and fight that. You may have all of your tools with one vendor, you may split across many vendors, and that's okay. We see this kind of evolution. There's many reasons for why you need to keep introducing tools. And typically we'll see, for a smaller engineering organization, they'll start off with just driving autonomy. Individual teams can just do whatever they like, go and get successful. And then as you scale, you realize that you need to kind of get some kind of standards and kind of conformity just so that you can support, engineers moving between teams and not having to relearn everything all again. And you may have many acquisitions, where new tools get brought in. So you're always going to have lots of different tools in your environment. And our perspective is don't fight that. You can't avoid it. And if you have a vendor tell you that they're going to get rid of all your tools by replacing it with theirs, they're not. They're just going to add yet another tool to your tool stack. And so just embrace it. All right. So we look at, these kind of core, kind of pillars that we have, and really we think about metrics as our way to kind of find, anomalies in trends, right? Looking at high level, looking at request rates, looking at kind of latency, looking at errors, right? This is a good way for us to kind of track and understand what's happening from a kind of a high level. But then we use our logs, right? When something goes wrong, we want to kind of find that needle in a haystack. How do I go and find that specific error message that resulted in a customer getting a 500 response? And then from that we can dive into looking at traces, which is really understanding if a customer's experienced an issue, right? They haven't got the response they expected. We can go and have a look at that request and understand exactly exactly what happened, which component was responsible. Perhaps it was a database lookup that failed, or perhaps a caching server was unavailable, perhaps a single component just sent back the wrong data. And so traces really help us kind of understand that full kind of request. And so we have all these three, but as we kind of look at how do we drive more value, you get that from the interaction across all of them, right? So you can have your metrics, you can have your logs and traces, but where you start getting a lot of value is when you have your ability to kind of pivot and transition between all of them in a single tool. This is really what we try and do at Grafana, is like have that single tool. No matter where your data lives, we want to give you that experience where you can start with your metrics, you can dive across to your logs, whether that's in Loki, whether it's in your Elk stack, whether it's in Splunk, and likewise shift over to kind of your traces. And that kind of experience of moving through these different tools is really what kind of helps engineers get to that kind of root cause, right, and kind of reduce that mean time to resolution that our managers always like to focus on. And so for us, building these kind of tools, helping our customers do this, is something that we're kind of passionate about, and we're trying to do that in our very kind of big tent way across all of our stack, but it's something that we're kind of continuing to work on. And one of the things I really want to focus is, I kind of mentioned it earlier, observability, it's not just about the tool set. It's really about your kind of journey, right? And observability is a journey, right? There is no end state that you should go and target. You should just be focusing on kind of moving things forward and getting to where you are, because even if you think you're doing things really great today, there's always opportunity for improvement. There's always ways to look at the next level, the next things that you can go and get done. And so we really want to make sure that as we think about kind of our observability strategy, we want to make sure that we're kind of thinking about what are those immediate outcomes that we're trying to go and focus on. And different organizations are at different spaces. We work a lot with a lot of different customers, both from small startups all the way through to the world's largest enterprises, and they're all on a varying degree of kind of maturity in the space. And so, as you kind of think about it, you want to start with, how do I just know about, do I have the data to know if there's a production issue, right? Am I aware that our customers are feeling pain without them having to kind of contact us and tell us? That's obviously the first step. That's the first thing that we want to focus on, is just making sure we know that there are problems. The next one is really around, once we are aware of problems, do we have the data, to be able to understand, what has happened, right? What's going on? We want to kind of be able to dive in and know exactly which component has failed, or know exactly which region or which cluster we need to go and investigate. And so really that's kind of the second stage. And then the last one is really about do I have the data and the processes in place to be able to support that kind of investigation process, right? Do I have a really good kind of incident response process where teams can collaborate, where they can share data, where they can have access and visibility to what everyone else is looking at, so that they can kind of come together and find solutions. And this is kind of the big challenge, right? Like, observability is not an isolated kind of practice. It really fits into our general kind of modernization of how we build and ship software. You really need to make sure that as an organization that you're focusing on a kind of a larger kind of strategy around kind of modernization. You can't just go and throw observability in the mix if you've got separate ops and application teams, right? Because they have different incentives. They're trying to do different things, and so we see this kind of maturity, right? You start with someone coming in, your CIO comes in and it's like, yes, digital transformation. We're going to go and change how we do things, and then we kind of move into engineering, right? We shift to move into cloud, right? To move into a better way of provisioning infrastructure and the speed at which we can get things done, right? We move to this DevOps model, right? We really want to empower our engineers, to be responsible for, their software. We want them to build their software, write their software. We want them to ship it, and we want them to own it when it's in production. And this is really, really pivotal when it comes to observability, where, you really want to make sure that your engineers are motivated to want to improve, right? And there's no motivation like someone getting paged at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so, we really see this is important. And then the next phase is really kind of like around platform maturity, right? We obviously see, huge, explosion use of Kubernetes around the world, and these kind of products and capabilities have really changed the way that we go and, deploy our software and run our infrastructure. And then layering on top of that, it comes to our observability, right? I've got kind of all these core foundations. Now, how do I make sure that things are running kind of smoothly and that I'm getting the kind of results that I'm looking for? All right, and so with that, I'll move on to a little bit around the future, right? Where do we see observability going? So there's a few things. So one, We talked about the 3 pillars of observability. We really, at Grafana Labs, we think that the 4th pillar is continuous profiling, right? This really gives you that next layer of kind of insights, into what's happening inside your applications. And so with continuous profiling, it starts with, a profile. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with it, kind of give you that understanding of, how resources, whether it's CPU, whether it's memory, and just being able to, get a visualization with that kind of flame graph, right? Being able to understand where is time being spent in my application, right down to the code level, right? And so you can kind of dive in and go, okay, well, so this function here, this line of code is the thing that's using all the time. We have seen a lot of advancements. So obviously there's Periscope, which we acquired last year. There's Polar Signals. There's a few others. I know Datadog has one. A few others, right? So we're seeing this kind of grow and popularity. It's still, early on. It's kind of those that are, kind of at the tip of the spear that are kind of adopting these technologies. But we really do see, this getting adopted. And the one reason for that for us, really comes down to, this next level of maturity. They've focused on reliability, they've got good uptime, but the next thing that they're focusing on is, performance and latency. And so depending on your industry, we know this is important, right? So, we see that, slowdown's the new downtime. And so if you're in an e-commerce site, you're mobile, right? We know the data is there to support the fact that if you've got performance problems, you've got a revenue impact. So this becomes more important for our organizations to be on top of this and make sure that, they're putting the effort in to go and to deliver, the kind of performance that their users are expecting. All right, what's the next big thing we see? So there's been obviously a big shift and change in the kind of the macroeconomic environment over the last couple of years. And so there's a really big push, certainly in the observability space, about realigning value with cost. Right? You can go and collect all the data you want and you have great observability, but it's going to be very expensive, right? And so we just see this kind of in the market right now. There's a big push to kind of change, how we tackle that. A lot of it is just around cost, right, and what vendors are doing. But there's also some kind of technology and things that we're doing. So, there's a number of vendors, that are doing this, right? We launched our own adaptive metrics product, which is really about kind of analyzing the data that you're sending, analyzing how your data is being used, so what dashboards are actually referencing that data, what alerts are referencing that data, and then looking at ways to just kind of aggregate away data that's not being looked at, right? And this really is important, for maintaining control of costs, and we see this being a really important tool for teams that are moving towards kind of centralized observability teams, where that central team owns the budget, but they don't have control over the data that their users are sending. And so, we get users who will just start spamming huge volumes of data, and they don't have a way to stop that, right? Whereas, we want to kind of empower them to have those tools to be able to say, I can make trade-offs around the amount of data I have versus my cost, and I can accept those. If I want to, spend more, I can. If I want to spend less, I can do that too. I just have, less granularity of my data. And so we see this, happening, across the industry on metrics, and we're working to do this, across kind of all of the pillars of observability. We kind of call this our adaptive telemetry, and we really think this is kind of the path forward in the way of getting, just aligning that value and cost, right? Because each individual customer, each individual user is going to have a different, measure for what their value is and what their that value cost ratio. So we want to give people kind of tools to go and address that. And so the next big obviously industry trend we're seeing is Gen AI, and thanks to the Gen AI tools for generating all these images for me. We really see this being really transformational for the observability space. I was at a conference last year where we had someone presenting from Atlassian, and he was talking about Gen AI and the impact, and he's like, rather than me tell you, I'll just ask ChatGPT to tell you, and had a great way of it coming up, and I think he said make it a little bit funny, and ChatGPT came and said, look, Gen AI is not going to take away anybody's job yet. I thought that was a little bit scary, but yeah, we don't see that happening. We really see Gen AI as being a tool that's going to really, accelerate, people understanding the data that they've got. One of the great things that our large language models can do for us now is being able to summarize, huge volumes of data into something that we can kind of, really, understand and kind of parse really quickly. And we see the same for our observability data, right? It's huge volumes of data that we're collecting, and machines are very good at taking all that data, understanding it, and showing us what is actually valuable and important. And we see this, already. There's many, vendors in the space that are adopting this technology, and finding ways, to help users, find that root cause of their problem, right? Our machines are not going to fix the problems for us, but they're really good at getting through the data and helping kind of, really significantly reduce that search space that we have to look through to go and find the problems. We have our own a tool now. I think it's a beta tool, something we call SIFT, right, which is really part of our incident response process. And all this is doing is, when an incident happens, in the background, it's going and looking at our data, parsing through it to bubble up, what is useful information, right? What is something that's probably related to what's going on, right? That may be, a deployment that's just happened around the same time, right? We may be, we're seeing a whole bunch of CPU throttling, perhaps you've got a noisy neighbor situation, on your machine. So it's really about kind of bubbling up this information that's relevant, right? That helps engineers, better understand, what's going on inside their system. And so we think, this is really just the shift that we're seeing, kind of industry, leveraging, this machine learning and kind of generative AI tools. And we think this is going to continue. I think we're seeing we've got some tools that we use for, summarizing incidents, right, which I find is great, because you've got your incident log, you've got all the details about what has happened, what engineers have done, and there's a button you can press at the end that says, build me my incident report summary, which is great, right? Saves people a lot of time. And that's really where we see this going, right? Gen AI is not going to replace jobs, but it really is going to save people a lot of time and help us be a lot more productive with what it is that we're trying to do. The next big trend that we're seeing is, kind of the shift of observability, right? Like it's been focused around kind of this IT operations metrics, but, we're just seeing it kind of spread across, our businesses and what we're doing, right? No matter what it is that you're doing in an organization, we have a saying at Grafana Labs, if you don't measure it, you can't improve it, right? So we just want to measure as many different things as we can and be able to kind of visualize that data and track and see how things are going. But we're just seeing this big trend of kind of just blending and merging of say, like BI data with your operations data, right? And there's a huge amount of value that you get out of that, right? I think even when Torkel first created Grafana, one of the first use cases they had was at a company in Sweden, was like the Swedish eBay, and they used to just overlay their revenue data with their reliability data, and very quickly they could just look at the data and say, great, we know exactly how much an outage is costing us, and that was really, really important, and really helped kind of the leadership make decisions around how they should invest in reliability, because if that number is, revenue loss is low, then yeah, maybe you don't need to invest in reliability, but if that revenue number, the number that you're losing is high, then you've got a dollar amount that you can put on how much it's costing you and how much you should go and spend on this. And so we see this obviously BI data moving across. We're also seeing a lot more work, in understanding the software development lifecycle. We had a internal product tool that we built called Gracie, which is really around us monitoring our own CI/CD pipelines. And there was a presentation at FOSDEM in February, and it was like a sold out, it was like the room was overflowing, right? Everyone was really interested to see how can you better manage, and understand your CI/CD. And this is, for us, really comes down to, this, need and this passion for people to drive reliability in their systems. And one way to do that is, how do I make sure that things are working pre-production, right? How do I make sure that what's happening, as I build my software is working correctly? Because, if I'm seeing my builds consistently fail, then perhaps there's something wrong with, how our engineers are approaching kind of their software builds and kind of reliability. And we want to make sure we can go and address that and get, really, successful builds. We want to make sure that we get software that is actually working before we go and ship it into production. And we see this as well, certainly with our load testing as well, another tool for like focusing on how you understand how things are working before things go into production. And the other big one, people ask me this all the time, is like, what about security, right? And for us, we think this is really important, right? As things have evolved, security teams, they have, we looked at the observability tool set, right, where everyone's got, 6 or more tools, but in security, it's even worse, right? There is dozens and dozens of tools that teams are using, and they have an overlap, and they all do something a little bit different. And what this has led to is, security is now an observability problem, right? Like, how do you understand all of this data that's coming out, all your tools to make sense of it? And so we see this kind of shifting, right? A lot of security teams are moving towards observability tooling, to really help them kind of understand. And again, this kind of fits together, right? Like there's so much value you can get out of overlaying, all of this data and having good visibility into my infrastructure metrics, my business insights, as well as security impact and all those kind of things. And just being able to kind of bring all this data together gives you so much more context about what's happening inside your organization, and just really helps you better understand those systems, right, from a holistic approach. So this is something that we think is going to kind of continue. All right, so just to kind of recap, right? So, observability, for us, it's really about understanding, how complex systems work, right? We want to have, great data so that we can kind of peer behind that curtain and see what's happening inside our systems. Changes in our software development lifecycle, over the last 10 years, have really meant that, observability is more important now than it's ever been. We've got a lot more kind of complexity. It's more difficult to understand what our systems are doing, and so we need, better tools, better processes and capabilities to be able to understand. Observability is that approach, right? It helps us kind of tame complexity. We can't fight the complexity. It was a deliberate choice to add the complexity because it had other benefits. So we need a way to kind of get on top of that and make it so that it's not a problem for us. And we obviously, we focus on our metrics, our logs, and our traces, but also, we're continuing to kind of branch out into other types of data that we can kind of complement and bring together to better understand our systems. And the key one really is that, observability, it's a journey, right? It's something that you should embark on, right? And you really want to focus on, kind of progress over perfection, right? How do we just get better than we were yesterday? And, looking at the future, right? So, I'm a big fan of continuous profiling. We just see this, really useful data, it's that next level once you've got reliability, really focusing on performance, really, helping you understand. It's great for a lot of really complex problems that are difficult to solve otherwise. And, the big one really for the industry for us is just this, realigning cost and value, right? We just feel as though things have kind of got a little bit out of whack where they should be. And we think that, the industry in general is going to be shifting and kind of pivoting to better control these and just help our customers, help our users, feel as though they're getting value out of the tools that they're having. Because, if they're not, they'll just stop using them, and that's not going to be good for anybody. Gen AI, I love it. I think it's really powerful. I do think it's going to be really impactful. We actually had some conversations last night at the dinner around this, where I think, Gen AI, I think it's going to be as impactful as kind of the internet was. But I think we are going to have to go through that kind of .com bubble first, where the hype is going to have to, reach reality at some point. But I do think it is going to be really kind of transformational. And then obviously, just this trend of observability, right? It's really expanding beyond, just our IT operations metrics. It's moving into other parts of our business, into our BI, into our security, into our software development life cycles. And so with that, I'll open it up to some questions.
Anyone got any questions? Raise. Oh, there we go.
Hey, thanks very much. So my question's actually around like the architecture of software applications and how we make those more observable. You kind of touched on microservices, obviously, which is the big one. But specifically looking at the internals, have you kind of discussed or thought about strategies to deal with that problem?
Yeah, so we're obviously seeing a lot of development in this space. Specifically open telemetry, right? We see that as the path forward. We really, I'm a big fan of it. I always have been. It's slow. It's a big open source consortium of people with different opinions trying to drive change. But we've seen some really good progress, specifically on kind of the client libraries, right? So that's obviously going to be the easy way as you're building your software. If you're thinking about observability, there's go and make sure you instrument it, right? So you've got the data coming out, but there's a huge volume, right? The majority of software that exists is going to be software that's not going to get rewritten, and so there's plenty of tools now for being able to go and collect that data, right? So we see depending on the language that you're using, if it's if it's JVM based, it's a little bit easier to kind of insert, some ability to capture data. But where we see it really is the power of eBPF. And so that's where we're kind of focusing our efforts. You can just go in there, throw in an agent. It can, inspect your applications while they're running without you having to go and instrument them. So there's plenty of ways to do it. And then also, as you're looking at your kind of journey, one thing that is always available is logs, right? Just about every single application ever written has got logs. So that's always a good place to kind of start gathering some insights and working out, what kind of data do you already have, and is it valuable, and where can I go and kind of prioritize efforts. But the big ones for me, I think, open telemetry is certainly kind of building out to be the best way to kind of instrument your applications, and the standard that I think the world is moving to. Every new customer that I talk to these days are already using OTel or plan to be using it. It's really quite popular. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Have you got any war stories or more detailed war stories on the journey that people go through? I'm lucky enough to work with a bunch of different teams on various parts of the scale, and some of them are still SSH logs, single box, and they're on a journey, and I can see them going to centralized logs, metrics. OTel, traces, flooding boxes, too much data, $1 million bills. How can we fast track that story so I don't have to just watch the same movie over and over again?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So one of the interesting parts of observability is it's not something you can force onto engineers, right? They have to want it, right? Engineers, like a top-down approach of coming in and leadership saying, hey, we're going to do observability, it doesn't work, right? Engineers really need to be motivated to want to do it, right? This is where it comes to kind of like this DevOps culture, right? Of those that are writing the applications are responsible for them in production. That motivates them to want to, focus on a culture of kind of reliability and improving things. So that's the first step is kind of driving that. The next is, really kind of, understanding the data that you have, right? I think one of the big challenges people have is they look at observability and they say, great, I want it all and I want it all now. And I think if you take a step back and you think about, no, it's a journey, right? We need to kind of make incremental progress over time, rather than trying to just, boil the ocean. I think that's the most important one. And it really just comes down to that, focusing on how do I get better today than I was yesterday.
Anyone else? Couple more.
Thank you. My question is around Gracie plugin for the CI/CD optimization. Any plans to roll it out to GA?
So that one's interesting because that was just an internal project. It's not a product, and we were kind of shocked by it. So yes, there's conversations happening, but I don't have any details about when it will be productized. I mean, it's open source. I mean, it's available. You can use it. So go nuts. But as far as us, it's not a funded team to go and do things. That can always change. We like to, say we like maintain optionality at the organisation, which is just a nice word for saying let's save decisions for the last moment. But it's important. We want to be able to kind of shift and pivot, where our customers go, and we are seeing a lot of kind of demand in this space. It seems to be something that's it's resonating really well with the community. So I wouldn't be surprised if we throw some resources at it and actually fund the project.
I think we had another question over here.
In the past, I've used Grafana that's been set up by other developers, and they're great tool when it's already been set up by someone, but I'm in a workplace that there's no such infrastructure, and I try setting it up, and I have a lot of difficult time, and also there's so many different competing priorities that I just never able to finish the journey. And is there any plans that maybe something like, say, we have like Microsoft Office, majority of people use 90% of it, and then we could just tuck away 10% to make our operation. I'm mainly more focused, although I'm a DevOps, but 90% of my time is now operations, and I have so many other things I have to look after. I just don't have time to go through the process.
Yeah, your challenges are very common, right? It's the number one feedback we get, across our product stack is that it's difficult to use and ease of use, and it really comes down from from our experience, building open source, right? Open source, we're really focused on delivering capabilities, and it's when you kind of engage with the open source community, they're a bunch of hackers, they're a bunch of builders. They often like to have, you know, all of that power, right? Because they're going to go and build something that's really powerful, right? And we had this kind of learning experience as we then started engaging with customers where they were like, yeah, I love, you know, I see what people have done with open source and it's amazing and I want that. But I just want it to work, right? I just want it out of the box. And so that's where we've kind of shifted and focused a lot, certainly on our cloud platform. It's just that opinionated, out of the box. You click it, you've got your dashboards, it's already built for you. You don't have to go and build a whole bunch of new dashboards, right? And so cloud, go and use cloud. Yeah.
All right, one more. Anyone? No? All right, put your hands together for Anthony, folks. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.